welcome to StormCrows TV, the channel where two lit chicks talk about all things reading and writing. I'm Emily.
I'm Allegra.
And today we are beginning our descent into madness, and by that I mean we are continuing our Discovery of Witches television adaptation review with Season 2, which we were totally excited to watch. No bullshit. Normally, we just dive right in and we move from topic to topic organically, but today we decided to go a little bit more structured. We're going to give you a list, because who doesn't love lists? And that list is our top 5 WTF thing about A Discovery of Witches Season 2. So far, yes. We're only covering episodes 1 and 2. So, Allegra, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with our number 1.
We've always talked about how gorgeous this show is, but the top 5 number 1 thing is, what is Diana wearing? Her first gown is this really gorgeous on-point Tudor thing, and then everyone's like, oh, that's 50 years out of date. You need something newer. And then they put her in this, I think it's mostly Elizabethan, but it's got this collar that does this and then flops down, and it is not starched like a proper ruff would be. I had to do research about whether or not it was some sort of transitional fashion between like the just poking out of a little bit of lace to the big ornate ruffs. It doesn't look like it, because it really looks more restoration or more Ren Fair, especially considering how on point the costuming was like up to that moment, because you see her getting dressed and undressed, and they've got all the proper layers in. They're doing all the right things. It looks
awesome. Look at the side characters and extras. They're on point, too.
I mean, we're going to ignore Matthew's leather pants and, like, the Tudors type doublet rock and roll thing. You got to do some things for a modern audience. I get it. Diana's just really doesn't look good for a modern audience. Also doesn't work for the exact moment she's in. So I asked the question on Twitter, and a couple people who know the books replied to me, and basically the best consensus anyone could come up with was, I guess in the books, which I haven't got very far into, Diana always looks a little bit off. Like she always either messes up a trend or does a twist on a trend or something. I'm guessing that's what the costume designer was trying to do. I don't know if that was, it was a choice. I also know that Teresa Palmer was nursing when she was filming, and that caused a lot of problems with her costumes, because high Elizabethan really does not lend itself well to nursing mothers. You had a nursemaid in churching and all that business for a reason. So I don't know if maybe the collar was acting as some sort of easy floppy thing to kind of hide some stuff, but
okay, so I've got 2 issues with the explanations provided, and the first one is, okay, so she's meant to look off, but she's not the one who went shopping for her gown. The person who bought her gown is someone who, I would argue, based on the everything that we've been given so far, is a woman who lives there and has not herself time traveled, being not a witch. My second issue comes back to how the dress fit. And yes, I understand nursing is a thing, but the amount of space that was in the bodice was very distracting. And, you know, for people who follow our channel, and I feel like I say this almost every episode, Allegra is definitely the fashion savvy of the two of us. I'm sort of learning. I'm more into, like, armor and shit like that, but, like, I'm learning as I go, and just by virtue of being Allegra's friend, I have no choice. So I look at that. And yes, Elizabethan clothes aren't practical in terms of nursing in some ways, but you don't have to be like period specific. You can hide a button. You can hide some things and make it fit better, but to our eyes, we'd be none the wiser.
Yeah, her day dress really did not appear to properly fit, the bodice especially, but they did some weird things with her proportions too. I don't know a huge amount about Elizabethan fashion. I pretty much jump off at the end of Henry VIII's reign, and like I'll see you in the Restoration. I just don't love Elizabethan fashions that much, but I do have friends who are like hardcore Elizabethan reenactor stuff. So like what you've osmosed from me, I've osmosed from them, and I've worn Elizabethan a couple times. Proportions are weird, and I'm guessing maybe they were trying to make things work better for her, and I'm gonna try to give them a pass, but like that collar, oh, I hate that collar so much, especially because I've seen pictures of like other outfits, and they have some decent ruffs and like what did we just forget the starch for the day? Like what's going on? Aside from that outfit, it's not terrible. It's like a solid they tried. But everyone else's is gorgeous, which just makes it weirder. So
yeah, it gets back to that Diana's a snowflake and she's unique. So, jumping right to number 2, we're going to talk about Christopher Marlowe, or as his friends affectionately call him, Kit, and I will be calling him Kit going forward. So if he's meant to be the bad guy, someone is doing a shit job, because we've been kind of stalking some of the fandom sites and forums, and people are like, oh my gosh, he's so awful, he's so mean, and I guess he's being painted as like a sub antagonist, but I'm sitting here going, he makes some good points.
and honestly, from his POV, like why wouldn't you be terrified and horrified? Like basically his boyfriend, bestie friend,
No boyfriend.
something.
Okay. I mean, lovers. They were lovers.
So your boyfriend goes off and like on a secret mission, comes back with married to a chick who is also like a creature who is his sworn most hated enemy and is completely like enchanted with her. Of course he thinks Matthew's under a spell. Who wouldn't?
Well, this hits on something that we started talking about this later into season 1 in our last series, where it's not really clear if Matthew's enchanted or not, because from what we gather, their union, or their whatever this relationship is defined as, was preordained in a sense, and so it's a question of, did the parents do this, or does Diana's magic or need-based magic dictate she needs a protector in Matthew? Maybe he is under some enchantment and Kit's got reason to suspect.
The way they explain the time travel to Kit, like, oh well, your Matthew is possibly in some sort of hellscape limbo land of the dead. We don't know, timey-wimey weirdness. So like everything adds up to seeing Diana as an eldritch terror. Like she's literally dropped the Matthew he's in love with and he cares about into the netherworld to, I guess, wander around being a ghost. What's he gonna do, like, when they finally leave the timeline? Does he come back, like, thinking he's been on a 3-week bender?
We'll come back to that. We've got a special slot for that question. Okay. I mean, what I would say to Kit is, like, don't worry, you've only got a couple of years left before you get murdered in a gambling accident gone wrong. But your works will be remembered.
You're gonna be a character on Upstart Crow on the BBC, so that counts, right?
Or you're going to be part of this historical Avengers that Deborah Harkness put together. I'm sorry. Like, I've got an issue with that. Like, anyone who's anyone in the United Kingdom late 1500s is just somehow tied to Matthew Claremont. Like, what the actual if I would not be shocked if the 10-year-old that they adopted, and don't get me started on that, but like, I wouldn't be shocked if one day he's like, oh, my name is Thomas Hobbes. Like, everyone who is, like, that you read about in a history book is suddenly in here.
I guess there was only 10 people in Elizabethan England. What could you do?
Make up some names because peasants exist? Like, what?
But we don't talk to peasants. I guess we should move on, as long as we're talking about the god tier business. Why is Matthew's religion suddenly a plot point when it was not a plot point before? Like,
can you talk about Elizabethan England without talking about the religious upheaval?
No, but like, I honestly assumed that once you became the vampire child of, like, I guess the vampire prince who's older than mountains, and Isabeau, who's a bajillion years old herself, possibly your view on the cosmos and religion would alter slightly. Like maybe vampires would have their own thoughts on things, but apparently no, Matthew's still a devout Catholic, and they aren't just playing some sort of religious political game with Philippe and the politics of the Middle Ages. I didn't realize he was still a devout Catholic. That didn't seem to have come up before. I didn't notice.
Like, being a devout Catholic, is that the same thing in England? So we're still in Tudor England. Elizabeth's father was just, I don't know if people have heard of this, was not a friend of the Catholic Church. When you talk about Henry VIII, do you talk about pre-Anne Boleyn?
You do if you're talking. Well, I guess now
Okay,
you
maybe
do more
not you.
because you.
Maybe not you. Because you're history buff, history nerd. We'll talk about Henry and his strapping, dashing hunter accident marrying brother's wife sort of way. But like most people, when you think of Henry VIII, you're thinking the rotund, wife killing, turkey leg eating, bastard. Cast out the Catholic faith because they told him no, and I'm the king, and how dare you. The point I'm making, I swear there is one, is that being Catholic's not the same thing anymore, because now you've got Church of England, you've got Calvinism, you've got all these other Protestant-based faiths, and Catholicism's not what it is there like it is on the mainland. And also, Catholicism in the 1600s is not the same as it was in the 500s when he was changed into a vampire. Christianity was just being born at that point.
500 AD, I mean, he remembers priests being able to marry. I think that's before the council of, well, all the councils that really decided things. That's he grew up in a very different Catholic church. So, yeah, it seems really weird that Diana is yelling at him about him being a devout Catholic, killing his own kind of people. It's like, girl, you're a historian. He's from 1,000 years ago.
Well, also, you're a historian. Catholics killed Catholics all the time. Catholics killed a lot of people all of the time. There are characters in this book who went on religious crusades. Domenico was a doge, and he basically took a fleet to Jerusalem to rescue King Baldwin. I swear, it's the Avengers of history.
But there was only 5 names back then, okay?
Sorry, no, this is the Avengers of history, and Baldwin was apparently the king. Domenico swoops in there and becomes this terror to the Greeks and amazing person to Venice. Like, all of these people killed for religious reasons, and they killed religious people. They're vampires. They don't give a shit about you.
I was just like, wait a minute, Subtour is supposed to be in the south of France, right?
I think so, yes.
1100s, 1200s. I'm not good with numbers. The Albigensian Crusade went on in the south of France and permanently disillusioned most of the southern French aristocracy that survived it against the papacy just a little bit. I mean, then you add in the whole, Avignon papacy and that whole nonsense, but Albigensian heresy should have been huge to the de Clermonts, because that would have been happening right around their home base. But yeah, any real feeling they had for the Catholic shenanigans, I would have thought would have been beaten out of Matthew somewhere around the 1200s, if not the 1100s, if not the 1000s, to be quite honest.
Matthew is clearly, in the late Elizabethan era, a political figure. He's killing Catholics because that's what makes sense for his family. And up until he met Diana, the family came first for him. That was always crucial point in season 1 where it's why are you suddenly turning your back on the family? But also, I don't think Diana has any right to be upset with him, because I feel like if you suddenly date somebody, you don't really have the option of going, well, remember that ex-girlfriend you dated when you were 21 that I never met, and I'm going to suddenly be mad at you about the choices you made before we met. Dude, he was a completely different person. You didn't know him, and he's got a facade to keep up. So,
Well, she's a historian. He's working with Walter Raleigh and definitely working for Walsingham. He's deep in the intrigue. And I don't particularly love Elizabethan history, but I know enough to know, if you're running with that crowd, you're going to be doing some deep, deep levels of shade. And, just don't ask questions. Or rather, ask questions, but, do it as a newspaper reporter. You're not going to, don't take it personally. And Diana gets really angry. And I love that the first 2 episodes, really mostly plotline wise, is Diana, stay here. Diana does not stay there.
Yeah, that was something I definitely caught on to. But while we're on the subject, of history and all that fun stuff. Why the are witches being persecuted with the Catholics? Because there was like a throwaway line about how the Spanish Armada, which for those of you not familiar with the Spanish Armada during the 1500s, they were the fucking beast of the ocean. If the Spanish Armada was coming after you, good fucking luck, right? So when England defeated the Spanish Armada, this was an upset. So this would be like the Houston Texans beating Tom Brady New England Patriots. It just shouldn't happen. So when you have this throwaway line that the witches helped defeat the beast that is the Spanish Armada, you would think that they would be held in a higher regard and not be persecuted.
The only thing I can think with that, Elizabeth or possibly Walsingham specifically, is actually more concerned about the amount of power they may have becoming an issue now that they have proven themselves capable of defending England, possibly more than the crown. So, like, yeah, I could see some circuitous backroot logic to it, but yeah, the show hasn't presented the logic to it, so it's really coming across more like witches in Scotland bad, so witches in England now bad too, despite all logic and sense.
Well, yeah, because if you follow that train of thought of like, well, now we're going to be wary of them because they've shown this great power, if they're powerful enough to defeat the Spanish Armada, you would think that they could come together and be powerful enough to defeat the English crown when the English crown turns around on them. So there's a lot of things not fitting here. Especially since apparently a lot of the people close to Queen Elizabeth are supernatural.
Well, I was gonna say, especially considering that the whole the crown is hanging by a thread, because Elizabeth's getting pretty up there. And
yeah, she dies in 1603. So we're, I think, in the 1590s in season 2. So yeah, she's in the twilight years.
Basically, her heir apparents at various points in time are pretty much her cousin James, who's the King of Scotland, and apparently they're having some problem with Scotland's witches. And we all know, famously, James of Scotland was like a witchophobe because he had mommy issues. Arbella Stewart, who was another cousin who got basically kicked out of Grace because she married against Elizabeth's orders or whatever, something or other. I don't remember that much about Arbella. But I do remember that she was supposed to be the heir at different points. You've got a throne hanging by a thread, and you're pissing off the supernatural entities? What?
Also, you're going to sit there and tell me that the Doge was once a vampire and Venice is still not in charge of the world?
Especially at the height of the Venetian Empire.
And Domenico actually, like, he abdicated. It's pretty well documented now that we have supernatural people who are actually in the seats of government. So there's just so much that doesn't make sense. Like, why isn't Philippe king of the world?
From the sounds of it, he kind of is.
Well, okay, we can spend so much time on that, but let's go ahead and jump to number 4 on our list. Kind of hit on this when we were talking about number 2. So Allegra watched episodes 1 and 2 before I did, and she warned me that my brain would break when they tried to explain how time travel works in their little world. And it did, despite her warning. So essentially, for those of you who haven't seen it, spoilers, time travel just works. That's it. That's the extent of the explanation. Well, your Matthew's kind of in some time hole, and when we go back to our time, he'll come out. Even the Avengers spent longer explaining how the time continuum works. But now, like, this hand wave of time travel, it's there. Like, so you're gonna tell me Bearded Matthew's gonna come back out of his time warp closet and no one's gonna be... So remember that time you almost f***ed everything up with this one witch?
Literally no one. And the amount of people they have interacted with her as his wife, no one is going to proceed to mention to Matthew that he was married.
Not a damn person. I'm sorry. There's just so much wrong here. Like, you think it'd be written somewhere. So now I'm just led to assume that everyone in Matthew's life is a goddamn idiot.
Like all the like private like diaries and stuff we have from Walter Raleigh, or like all these Elizabethan people they're interacting with, Elizabeth's court records. None of them mentions.
Or his writer ex-boyfriend.
Right? Kit Marlowe doesn't stick this in his plays at all, ever. Nope. Mm-mm.
I think this has to be the laziest explanation of time travel I've ever heard, and the most irresponsible, because so much hinges on whether or not people keep their mouths shut. And we've met people. The more people who know something, the less likely it is going to be quiet. And I'm sorry, like, not once did Matthew Claremont go, there was this, like, period in my life where everything just went black. I don't remember anything. Yeah, I was friends with Kit, but I mean, there was so many drunken benders. Like, I literally lost months of my life.
Yeah, just totally. I went to Scotland this one time and then woke up 6 months later in a Highland bar.
Yeah, and what is that like for bearded Matthew? Like, okay, so someone shoved him into a TARDIS closet, and like, is he asleep? Like, or is he just kind of floating around in the ether, going like, what the am I on?
That point last season where they time space jumped as an experiment and went and hung out with his mom and had like a completely different night than they had originally. And then it basically timey-wimeyed and was like, oh yeah, when you jump back to your time string, everything goes back to the way it was. So like, possibly Isabeau doesn't remember that night the way they remember that night now. And I was just like, none of this makes any sense whatsoever.
I would almost be more forgiving if bearded Matthew existed in the same plane. Like, he is in Scotland, and now we have clean-shaven Matthew pretending to be Matthew from the future. Maybe the reason bearded Matthew never really heard about it was because, hey, there was an imposter going around pretending to be you, but let's not talk about that. The real you now is back. And that would make sense, as opposed to some Harry Potter bullshit.
They really have done such a bad job of explaining the limitations of, like, demon, witch, everything powers. So, like, is body swapping possible? Why are they not testing Matthew to see if he's glamored? Like, if he's someone else under an appearance spell? It seems like he would have a battery of tests.
Because one time he grabbed Kit Marlowe by the throat, and then that was the end of all discussion. My favorite thing there, though, is that Matthew threatens Kit, and his response is, yeah, I'm gonna go tell everyone this shit you told me not to go tell. And then when they're like, so Kit, did you do it? He's like, yeah, come at me, bro.
I respect Kit's choices. I don't know.
But, in Kit's defense, whether or not it's time travel, Diana, I think he would hate her in any era. I certainly do. This brings us to number 5.
Diana, stay put. Diana does not stay put. Like, just, that's the plot line for, like, 2 whole episodes. And then when you call her on it, she's like, no one's going to tell me what to do. And then it's like, well, then why did you bring a native Elizabethan back in time with you if you weren't going to listen to your guide?
I am woman, hear me roar. But, like, spoken with that same enthusiasm, it's not like I'm actually, like, intimidated. I am woman, hear me roar. That's how she delivers her lines. And I don't know what it is. I really like Teresa Palmer. I think she's a great actress. But there's just something so fucking wooden about Diana.
She does have a few lines, like, specifically that are delivered extremely flatly. And I'm like, I don't know if she's getting directed to do that. Before, like, you could kind of make it make sense with Diana being spellbound and maybe being alienated from herself, but that's no longer an option as an explanation. So what directorial choices are happening? She goes off and she follows the not future friends, like, ancestry, whatever. And she comes back and she's telling Matthew, and he's like, oh my god, I told you there's literally all of the danger in all of the universe. I told you not to go outside. And she's like, but I knew. And he's like, well, how do you know she wasn't calling you? And her literal line is something like, I just had a new way of knowing, of seeing. Like, her powers just magically, out of the ether, power after power of plot convenience is popping up.
But she can't crack an egg. And we've talked about this in some length, but, like, I call it, like, the Bella Swan effect. If you watch movies with Kristen Stewart that are not Twilight, or Zathura, if you remember that one, she's a good actress. She can sharpen her chops with the best of them when put to the test. But as Bella, the only way you could really get more wooden is if you cast a wooden plank. That's the problem when you have Mary Sue characters in film. It's one thing when you have a self-insert on the page because you're able to put yourself in that character, and that character takes on you and like what you want that character to embody. But when you're putting that to film, you're suddenly telling an actress, and that could be an actress of a high caliber or a low caliber, doesn't matter. When you give an actress a hollow character to step into, they're going to be hollow.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Jennifer Lawrence when she was doing Hunger Games, and people were criticizing her about her pretty flat-faced wooden performance of Katniss. Her performance of Katniss is actually brilliant and perfect if you've read the books, because Katniss doesn't show her emotions, is very removed from her emotions as a survival mechanism. And so Jennifer Lawrence actually portrays Katniss beautifully, but terribly if you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And so part of me was like, especially when it came with season 1, with the way Teresa was delivering, I was like, maybe it's a Katniss situation of she's trying to portray the way Diana's bound away from herself. But then as you move into season 2 where that's been lifted, but she's still delivering lines and some stuff really flat and really not a lot of emotion. And it's like, I'm hoping, because this is only to episode 2, like maybe she's gonna liven up, like it's gonna take some time to get accustomed to having the full range of emotion kind of thing going on, but it doesn't feel like Diana's emotions are fully connected, which does not lead well into the whole concept of, is her magic actually enslaving Matthew and anyone else that she needs? Because we didn't bother defining the limitations of her god tier magic.
Okay, so the thing with Katniss is you did have a love triangle in that book, same with Twilight. But the thing with the Hunger Games is there was more to the story than the romance. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't sell Hunger Games to you as a romance novel.
No.
And so it's like the character exists outside of Gale and outside of Peeta. This is a romance novel. Yeah, there's other plots going on. I mean, we're familiar with that. Like, we write romance, but we're also very connected to, does the plot make sense? Is it something people would be interested in? Like, we acknowledge people exist outside of the characters. I feel like someone told this author the whole point of the book is that nothing exists outside of the love story. The problem with that is if your character doesn't sell emotion to you and romance is the crux of your story, then you're not selling me a very good story. If I don't believe your character's in love in your love story, we've got a major issue.
Speaking of which, we're like bouncing around. You're getting used to like Matthew as this alternate older version of Matthew, who's actually, by the way, a lot more fun to me. Like, angsty scientist was only going to go so far, but like badass Elizabethan spy who's running around with Raleigh working for Walsingham while secretly working for his vampire prince dad, that is exactly my kind of crack. Like, I would have just read the story of bearded Matthew and Kit and been happy. Then you get like this whole part of Diana's like god tier magic appearing and getting more and more god tier. And then at the same time, then we cram in the convenient child character. Please tell me we're going to get more development with that or something, because like right now it just seems like they found a random kid on the street and took it home like a puppy.
And this is the issue when the whole thing hinges on the romance. It feels like the 10-year-old exists to make Diana look compassionate. I want you to not just take my word for it, I'm going to prove it, but you prove it in the most cliche way possible. Like,
yeah.
Can't you just show me Diana's compassionate through actions that she takes that naturally develop over the course of her story? Like, why did you have to bring in a pickpocket kid to just make it look better?
Her magic reaching out and finding stuff that she needs and bringing it to her. She wanted a kid, or she and Matthew had like one conversation randomly about how it would have been nice to be able to have kids, but they won't be able to have kids together. And suddenly they have a kid they can raise together.
Oh, that's so bad. Like, why? Oh, I hadn't even considered that. Like, I'm already pissed off that she's possibly tricked Matthew into a love story he doesn't want to be in. And now we're talking about kidnapping.
Getting raised by, or half-assed raised by a vampire and a witch with hella power is probably better in the long run than being a pickpocket living on the Elizabethan street corner, but
Yeah, tell me more about your parents. Well, my dad's a vampire prince and my mother's an eldritch god.
So basically, that kid's also going to have an awesome story that would be a far more interesting book.
But what really sucks is, as far as we know, this kid's absolutely normal. So when you introduce yourself like that and like people expect great things of you, they're like, "So what can you do?" It's like, I can burp the alphabet backwards.
I can pickpocket sort of well.
Not well enough to trick a mortal being, but you know, I get around. Plot twist. He knew Diana would be compassionate, so he wasn't really trying to pickpocket her. He was hoping to be adopted.
There we go. The kid was campaigning.
Well, there's something about him that screams spy. I would love if he turns out to be a 10-year-old spy.
I would be down for that. Like, that would be some, like, Game of Thrones Arya type messing and with it, and I would just love that.
But yeah, that comes out of my natural distrust of children.
And you, the teacher.
Hey, I taught teenagers. They're like mini adults.
I really, like, my face when the kid popped in and they just were, like, taking him home. I'm like, oh my god, are you kidding me? And also, you clearly didn't watch Game of Thrones, Matthew. You would have known better. But yeah.
But Matthew's proving to be the stereotypical English dad. I think he's already forgotten the kid is there.
Like, next week, he'll be sending the kid off to a monastery or to, like, another rival noble family.
You're gonna go stay with your granddad. That's gonna be an experience.
Okay, I would volunteer for that because the way they keep talking of Philippe and the fact that I already know he's played by James Purefoy, I want to meet Philippe. I am here for Philippe. I am in this season. I am watching it for Philippe. I don't actually care about anything else.
That does bring up this bonus list number, so we're gonna call it number Z or 0. We definitely need more Philippe, and just me personally, I'm going to need more Domenico.
I hope they both are in like episode 3 because I need some help. I could accept Baldwin as an antidote. So like season 2, by the way, does a lot of good things so far. Like we're 2 episodes in. The good parts are most of the costuming, except for Diana's wonky collar and bodice fitting.
But yeah,
like
talk about that.
Set design, like, oh my god, like the Septour and just the interior on the Elizabethan house that Matthew's in, and like everywhere they go, like the set designers deserve awards. And so does the cinematographer, because like again, this show is so beautiful that even when I'm so pissed off about some of the subtext and the characters, I'm still watching it for aesthetics. Like,
yeah, and this is something
so
that we talked about in season 1. Like, we have screenshots of just beautiful shots of Oxford or beautiful shots of like Septours, as you said. Like, it's a very beautiful show. And so yeah, the set designers did an amazing job. And as you said, the costumers did a great job, unless you're counting Fleetwood Mac.
I know it's weird to be harping on that one damn collar, but honestly, it's because everything else was so gorgeous and like on par. And I'm like, what is that?
It's not just the collar; it's the fact that that bodice was made for my titties.
I'm trying to give them benefits of the doubt because I do know it is hard to fit an Elizabethan and Tudor bodice, especially if you're breastfeeding and you're going up and down in sizes a bit. Like maybe some of the wonkiness was from that.
You're gonna tell me there's no amount of movie magic that exists.
To be fair,
listen. Catherine Zeta-Jones was pregnant during the filming of Chicago, so you can't tell me that you can't hide a nursing chest, but you can hide a Catherine Zeta-Jones baby bump.
Okay, you got me. I was just trying because they did everything else so really well, and I don't understand.
And then, like, Zooey Deschanel was pregnant during New Girl, and they didn't do these like CGI high tech things to hide the baby bump. They literally just had her cover with like pillows. There are cheap ways to do this.
To be fair, yeah. And if she was actually pregnant, that's actually a lot easier to hide in Elizabethan because it was sort of made to do that. Let's see, we're looking forward to is more James Purefoy, aka Philippe, more Baldwin, definitely more Domenico. Some explanation of what the kid is doing, I guess, and also if we could have about 80% less Diana stay here, Diana does not stay there. Like, well, I would like some less.
More Kit Marlowe.
Yeah,
I'd like a better explanation for time travel. as opposed to like, because I mean, I get you can hand wave and say maybe Diana's fucking wrong.
Yeah.
So I mean, I hope we get a better explanation as to how that's gonna work in the future.
And I mean, like, Diana and Matthew both seem to be just kind of guessing on that. So, like, I'm really hoping that there's actually some bigger twist or something. I am looking forward to. It sounds like they're going to go to the continent. So, like, maybe once they're out of the court of Elizabeth the First, it'll be less, like you called it, historical Avengers.
No,
Maybe
it'll get worse. I mean, there's more history on the continent.
I don't know. Maybe just exploring beyond the bounds of tours and Massachusetts and Oxford/London. I'm really waiting for them to get like super anachronistic and get called on it hard. Diana does not seem to be that interested in listening to what Matthew and the other people who are native to this time are telling her to do, and she also is just adding new powers every 5 minutes. So, like, I don't know. It just seems like she ought to be getting headed for a SmackDown of some kind soon.
Yeah, you would expect more from a historian.
Well, and like at the end of the last season, like she made a deal with a god.
Yeah.
There has got to be some payback. Because I don't feel like you make deals with gods and you don't violently wish that you hadn't made that deal at least once.
And like, as much as I love Diana as a goddess, I feel like she's not one that you want to
And can we point out that like Diana is a virgin goddess, and you're trying to have a dude and hooking up with him?
Yeah,
and
a militant virgin goddess. I mean, like, yeah, Athena was a virgin goddess too, but I mean, like, the whole cult of not fucking dudes was a big deal for the Artemis/Dianic cults.
Yeah, so like part of me is just waiting for like Matthew and Diana to have sex and like the goddess herself to just deliver an unholy smackdown upon them. Like that would be hysterical and fitting. Like if you have to actually go up against the gods themselves or something, you know.
Well, I'd also think, okay, so like Diana is granting your wishes. The implication here is the other Greek/Roman gods exist. So why the fuck is Matthew being Catholic a big deal again? Obviously, we're traipsing over some Hellenic paganism, and I'm not saying Catholicism and Hellenic religions can't exist in tandem, but like at the same time, why is no one making a bigger deal about the confirmation of a pantheon, not just a deity, but the implication that an entire pantheon of gods, demigods, and all the affiliated creatures actually exist. Like, there's proof.
And has woken up and has taken an interest in Diana. Like, if I was one of her aunts, I would be seriously freaked out about that.
Well, also, it's like, where's the crisis of faith? Like, regardless of what your faith is, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, whatever you are, to have something confirmed in your face, it's no longer faith, it's fact. Diana exists. How are you not, like, examining everything you knew about existence at this point? Like, if Diana exists, that means the Roman Greek version of hell exists, the Roman Greek version of heaven, or, you know, the Elysian Fields exists. It's like you have these new realities that you have to grapple with, and I feel like that just got brushed aside as well.
Right? Like, it feels like we should be like 2 episodes away from Lore Olympus happening. Like,
Right.
just like full on, like Hades, Carnunos, like gods know what kind of pantheons could possibly actually exist. Like, is Thor gonna pop up?
Oh my god, this is the Avengers. Yeah, I guess like that was something that I just now realized. Like, I think we may have talked about it briefly, but not to this extent of, you know, a whole religion's been confirmed before you. So why are you super worried about Matthew being Catholic? It's very clear which gods exist in this book.
I don't know.
That means Zeus exists. That means there's a very good chance that about 25% of Earth's population right now are sons of Zeus.
Oh god. Oh
and
no.
that is a liberal That is a liberal estimate.
That's a good point. So, like, suddenly, like, the creatures and their demigodness kind of makes more sense. Like, honestly, you just sit down and be like, oh, yeah, if Diana exists, then probably the gods made all of us at various points after, I don't know, the Cyclops or something. Like,
yeah, and demons are actually demigods.
Yeah, because, I mean, I know someone on, like, the fandom board or something was saying, like, how demons are coming from Platonic ancient Greek stuff. So it's like, oh, well, okay, so they're probably some sort of muse offshoot thing.
Yeah,
And
I mean, if you think about it, Hamish makes perfect sense as the son of Apollo.
really does. Man, now they all need to get sorted into cabins.
I think we just made the book/series a lot more interesting.
I'm waiting to find out that Diana's reason she's got god tier powers is she was actually some sort of whoopsie daisy offspring of, like, Zeus and Aphrodite or something.
And the only reason Diana helped her is because you're actually my half sister, and I don't expect you to be in my cult.
Right? Or, like, even just because it would piss off Hera and she was in a mood that day.
But then it's like, again, there's just so many questions of, okay, if the gods are real, then what the f?
I don't know. I'm hoping Philippe will have some of these answers.
New theory,
So,
Philippe is Zeus.
if Philippe is Zeus out and he is James Purefoy, that would make so much more sense.
He's the father of the vampires, and he didn't actually die. He's just kicking it with his brother Hades. Okay. They're on a boat cruise on the river Styx. They're just chilling.
Like, if you're playing around with timey-wimey balls of nothingness, who's to say that by the time you finish gomming around with it and you jump back home, Philippe won't actually be alive? Like, you'll have undeaded him by accident.
You know, making deals with Kronos. Because people confuse Kronos with Cronus. Two very different things. Cronus was the king, the one that Zeus overthrew, and then Kronos was the god of time.
Zeus released Kronos and his brothers from the prison and made the old Titan king of the Elysian Islands, home of the blessed dead. So yeah, maybe Philippe's been hanging out with his bro Hades and Uncle Kronos.
You know, I'd root it. Anyway, that said, we're probably going to have to wrap it because we have this bad habit of giving Em over an hour of video footage to edit. So, thank you for listening. If you agreed or disagreed with anything that we said, please hop down in the comments. We'd love to hear what you thought of A Discovery of Witches. Loved it, hate it, could live without it, whatever, however you feel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, and as always, have an amazing night, day, weekend, whenever you're listening.
See you next time.